Well, joining me now in the studio is Ali Khan from the Glasgow charity Roshni, who today published their own report on preventing radicalisation. We've also got the human rights lawyer Aamer Anwar, who represents the family of Aqsa Mahmood, who left Glasgow to join ISIS. And from Westminster, we're joined by Jonathan Russell from the think tank Quilliam, and they've advised the Prime Minister on counter-extremism. Thank you, gentlemen, all for joining us. Ali Khan, if I can turn to you first. You may or may not agree with the Prime Minister's solution, but has he correctly identified the problem?
He has identified the problem, and the problem is that young people are being drawn towards ISIS. But apart from that, I think the speech has been a disappointment. I think a lot of Muslims will be very unhappy with it, and I think it will have a much more negative effect than expected.
I mean, it's a fairly obvious problem that young people are being drawn towards ISIS. 700, we think, have left Britain to join ISIS. What he's specifically saying today is that you have to counter radical ideologies before they start espousing violence, when it's extreme views that are not necessarily violent. Is he right about that?
There's no message for the young people. Everything seems to be a top-down approach, and the advisors to Mr Cameron and whoever he has around him are not thinking of the young people when they're speaking out in public. The speech that Mr Cameron gave this afternoon, I think, was patronising to young people. It was insulting to Muslims across the world.
Jonathan Russell, I mean, your organisation was involved, I know, in talking to Number 10 before this speech was made. Do you think that's true, that this is a top-down approach that has no message in it for young people?
I think when the Prime Minister says that we've got to engage with Muslim communities and that we've got to engage with moderate voices whose voices are very often drowned out by the traditional community leader types who most often get airtime on television stations, I think the Prime Minister is absolutely spot on that we need to hear from a wider range of voices. And what he means by that, what Quilliam is trying to promote to him and to others in this policy area, is that we'd like to hear from more women, from more young people, from more minorities within minorities who have got a very valid viewpoint on this topic. I don't think that's patronising at all. I think that's simply a threat to those traditional community leader voices.
Aamer Anwar, is the Prime Minister right when he says that moderate voices of Islam are being drowned out by extremists?
No, I don't think they are being drowned out by extremists. I think, like Ali, I agree. I think it was highly patronising, because the mainstream media, quite honestly, isn't interested in listening to mainstream Muslims or moderate voices. It's patronising when you consider that. Where is this Prime Minister getting his facts from? You know, his grasp for the facts are astonishing. His contempt for the facts are astonishing. Recent polls by the BBC in February of this year showed that 94% of British Muslims believe we should obey the laws of this land. 95% have loyalty to this country, yet those who are non-Muslim, that only comes down to something like 70%.
Well, I think that was actually the Prime Minister's point. He was saying that the majority Muslim community do have very moderate views, live in Britain with British values. It's the extremist minority that he wants to try and counter.
I will take from the Prime Minister this. Charles Farr, who's the Director General of the Office of Security and Counter-Terrorism, worked directly for Theresa May. His Home Secretary actually said that the words that the Prime Minister is using are wrong. This idea of promotion of ideology, of terrorism, of the sections of the community condoning, what Charles Farr actually said was 700 Muslims out of a population of 3 million Muslims is actually tiny, and the Muslim community has been remarkably resilient to actually joining terrorism. I think we need to step back and realise that there's a complete exaggeration of what's going on. There's no condoning from the vast majority of the Muslim community. This focusing on this hatred and extremism. Many of us in the Muslim community are deeply angered when we see the likes of Anjem Chaudhry and others, you know, from Mal Mujahirun and extremists broadcast on national TV programmes, put on Question Time, you know, put on programmes.
Well, actually, I mean, in fairness, David Cameron was also saying that broadcasters should think about that before they do that.
Broadcasters should think about that, and I would welcome something like that. But in terms of, this is a rehash, and it seems to me that when we talk about our involvement in Iraq, which was no discussion, if we use the words, our involvement in Iraq radicalised, for the want of a better word, a whole generation of young people. Our involvement in Iraq was seen as an attack on Islam. Those are not my words. They're not the words of some left-wing organisation. They're the words of Dame Elizabeth Eliza Manningham Bueller, who was the Director General of MI5. MI5, MI6, the MOD repeatedly say, unless we address the grievances of young people, then those grievances will act as fuel as a recruitment sergeant for those extremists. And the Prime Minister has no solution, no answers in relation to that.
Jonathan Russell, we were a little light on policy solutions, it's true, whether or not you agree with Aamer Anwar's analysis of the speech. do we need to hear more about what he's going to do rather than what he's going to say?
Yes, absolutely. I hope this rhetoric turns into action, absolutely. But the fact of the matter is, it's not simply the 700 British Muslims whose tragic experiences has led them to join a group like ISIL. It's the fact that they are not being recruited or radicalised from the ether. There must be something before, and it is rather the much broader population, absolutely still a minority, but a broader number who sympathise, empathise or support the ideology that underpins this group that maybe we should be engaging with and trying to turn the tide on before they commit such violent
14 years
acts.
after 9/11.
My issue is, just to answer the point about foreign policy, that there were 1 million people who marched against the Iraq War. All of them absolutely feel that as a grievance and oppose that, absolutely. There is nothing inherently linked between that and the actions of those few who decide to go to ISIL. And the crucial words that my colleague said just before me was that it's a grievance that's seen as important. It's that perception that's important. It's the manipulation process. It's the exploitation within radicalisation that's so important. Because a grievance by itself is not sufficient. A grievance plus an ideology, unfortunately, is what prompts people to go and commit these unspeakable things. Now, in terms of what we do, absolutely, there's a role for our education system to try and turn the tide in this. If we can teach our young people critical consumption skills, for example, and the difference between Islam, the religion, and Islamism, the political ideology, then perhaps we can start to make a break in this generational struggle so that the next generation growing up do not think that the appropriate way to reacting to this grievance they felt is a movement to a jihadist organisation which is frankly reprehensible.
I think a start would be to start at the ground and work your way up. And I think an example is that we keep talking about Islamic State. Let's stop calling them Islamic State. Every time Muslims hear the word Islamic State, they're being pulled into it because it's affecting their culture and their religion. So I think the Sunday Herald last week said, let's use the word Daesh, which means cutthroats in Arabic. So I think start where you have the least amount.
Daesh is actually an acronym just comparable to ISIL.
Sorry, whatever we're calling them, Ali can, yes,
if you listen to my point, please. The point is you have to have a simple message which will resonate with the young people. The young people are your target people that you're trying to win their hearts and minds. And the way that you're talking, the way that David Cameron spoke this afternoon was really patronising to young people. It was a message that would be understood by middle-class people all over UK, but not the people that he's trying to engage with, which is the young people.
He wasn't necessarily directing the message at young people. He was directing it at wider communities and talking about an involvement and tackling ideologies, finding ways of speaking to young people.
If you want to tackle ideologies, let's take it back. If you wanted to tackle the rise of Nazism, we wouldn't just turn around by saying Nazism is evil. We all know in the Muslim community and the wider community that ISIS is evil. They are perverted. They are rapists. I'm sorry, I let you speak. They are rapists. They are paedophiles, they're barbaric. But the point is, we want to talk about is why young people are joining them. And those people who carried out the 7/7 attacks or the 9/11 attacks, they are not Muslims, they are despicable criminals, and they should be dealt with by the system. And to deny what MI5 and MI6 and the Ministry of Defence repeatedly say, you cannot just talk about ideology, you have to talk about the grievances and what's fueling on them. It seems very convenient for our Prime Minister to dismiss the question. And how ironic that 14 years after 9/11, that Al-Qaeda is being defeated, not by the West, not by policies of discredited organisations like Quilliam, but by ISIS, an even more barbaric organisation than Al-Qaeda, and we are now in the process of training and funding organisations in Syria and in Iraq that happen to align themselves with Al-Qaeda. I mean, when will we actually learn our history lessons? I mean, David Cameron must have failed at history at Eton if he's not willing to learn the lessons of history, because we are repeating exactly the same mistakes, and we will give cannon fodder for those extremists.
Jonathan Russell, is it trying to address this exactly what the Prime Minister is attempting to do?
Yes, and I think we've got to turn the tide in this. The question then becomes, you know, how practically we can do that. I note your point about how the speech was given. I think it's very, very important that this speech was given in a school in Birmingham to an audience of young British Muslims and others who are involved in the educational sector. I think that's of vital importance. This is not the domain, as it has been in the last decade, perhaps, for the security services, for militaries, for governments, but rather, and he's sending a message through the mode and the medium of his speech, this is a matter for all of us. We need to engage civil society, we need to engage our frontline workers, we need to engage Muslim communities, an important part, I'm sure you will agree, of our civil society, who can have a real impact in this.
All right, Jonathan Russell, Aamer Anwar, Ali Khan, thank you all very much for talking to us tonight.